How's everybody today? This is Pete sitting here at Spawn Fly Fish, and I think it's time for you guys to have yet another shrimp pattern come at you. So today in the vise we have the new SA254 from Ahrex, and this hook is really cool because here at Spawn we were able to collaborate with Ahrex and give our input on what would make a better jig hook, especially saltwater jig hook. And as you see, when you snug that bead up, that shorter neck just lets that bead sit right where it's supposed to, putting extra weight under the shank, which is really going to give you that jig effect that you're looking for. So this is the size 4 SA254. For the bead, we have a Spawn football bead, size 7.5 millimeter in gold. I'm gonna add some wraps of 0.020 lead-free wire here. Let's get that on. Looks like about 8 wraps. The number of wraps is completely up to you. We don't need the extra weight, but we do need to push into that bead and hold it into place. So after I cut both ends there, I use my scissors, just round over those cut edges, and then slick that bead right in like so. I'm gonna come back over and make sure it's the portion without the slot is underneath, and that's what's gonna make this the most effective. All right, for thread, I got some 6/0 uni, and this is the color Camel. Get rid of that tag end. And now we'll solidify those non-lead wraps, the weighted wraps, a little bit, and make sure everything is sitting where we want it to before we get it all tightened down. So just make sure that bead is sitting right where you want it, and then we're in business. All right. So if you notice where the end of the straight portion of the shank is right there, it sits just behind the hook point, and we're going to use that as a reference point here for our next element, which is some eyeballs. And for these eyes, I'm using the black mono nymph eyes from Hairline. This is the size large, and so I'm just going to tie these on to the inside of that curve versus the outside. And you might say, well, it's a lot easier on the outside, and that's true. But once you've got it like so, you've pretty much done all the work. Now we're going to treat these as any other dumbbell, and so it's an X wrap followed by a wrap in front and back like so. And that's going to solidify these eyes, but the reason I like them on the inside of that curve versus the outside is now they'll withstand a couple more bites before coming off or being chewed off. And if you're fishing saltwater especially, you know how important that is on these toothy critters. There we go. That's as difficult as it is to get those tied in. Now, for a little flash and a tension grab or hot spot, whatever you want to call it, the next thing we're going to add is some Steelhead, UV Steelhead Torch, Spawn Simi Seal. And the first thing we're going to do, as you can see, there's quite a gap here between those two eyes. First thing, let's dub a little noodle, and this doesn't have to be really tight. Just keep in mind that if it is tight, you're going to eat that space up fairly quickly, and it's going to condense in there, and you'll be able to lay your other materials on top and not have them push this out to the side or anything. So about a 3-inch noodle, and we're just going to start working it around. So there's half an X, one in front, and you see here there's not much to it. And now I've got enough of that bulk. I don't need it necessarily right behind the eye like that, but it'll work just fine. And now I'm going to add just a little more because we have a lot of materials coming on yet, and I do want something sticking out like those little mouth parts and everything else from a shrimp. So all I'm going to do now is veil a small bit on top of what we just dubbed in there like so. Slip it so that it's on both sides of that hook point, and then bring your rear portion forward, get that thread behind, and just one little wrap or so and it should tie that down. There we go. And bring down into the front, and you can see what's going to happen there. We're going to start getting that little shrimp profile. All right. Next step, we do want some antennae and feelers, and so for that I've got some Nature Spirit Bucktail, and this is the color ginger. And I'm not going to stack any of these fibers or any of that. I'm just going to use a few fibers that naturally sort of end roughly at the same spot. And you can see I've got a couple real long ones there. Let's get rid of those, and now I'm happy with that little clump. As far as how far out, we're looking at roughly a body length here, and if you tie that in, you can see, I'll show you, that's how far those fibers will stick out, and that's pretty much all we need, nothing crazy. So let's get that tied on top with a couple loose wraps to position on top of the shank, and then we'll come forward, and as we get up to right behind that little tuft of Simi seal that we added, you can see it's going to splay those fibers out, and those will right up all along the top there and come out the front like so. And try to keep them on top of the hook shank. Here we go. If there are any that get unruly and you just can't handle it, well, pretty good chance there's a scissors on your tying table somewhere. Go ahead and utilize those. Cut out the tag ends. I don't like this fiber, so it's gone. That's the same thing with this fiber. It's gone. Finish tying those butts down, and while you're here, go ahead and continue another wrap over those weighted wire wraps. Alright, so now we'll move on to, let's actually add a little flash in there real quickly. This is the medium brown Krystal flash. I'm going to take 4 or 5 pieces of that and back that thread up a pinch, and now when I double this over the thread itself, I'll hold on to all the ends, come right to the hook shank, tie down behind it, and move forward right to there and let go. Divide it evenly over that hook point, and now you have half the fibers on each side. Finish wrapping those down. Another loose bucktail fiber. I'm going to trim these flash fibers at an angle, and I don't want them all at the same length. And if you look at the shrimp, a lot of those antennae and everything else, they're all different lengths. Some are very long, and then some are just outside the body, and that's what we're going for. So now let's add some legs. For the legs, I'm going with some Grizzly micro legs, and this is the pattern or color bone. And I'm going to take off 3 legs here. I want 3 per side. And the number of legs you want to put on your shrimp is kind of up to you. Don't have to get too crazy with it. So again, we're going to wrap that around our thread, just like so, roughly in the middle. Come up to right about there. I like that spot. And then these need to be tied as forward as possible against that last bit of dubbing and our flash and all that good stuff. So get those tied in like so. And these other guys, let's get our thread back behind them. And now we'll just bring that over the top and tie onto the other side, same way. And you can see that thread wrap right there, getting it butted up right against all those other materials. I do like to pull these down so that they're below the level of the eyeballs. And there we go. Nothing crazy so far. I hope you guys are sticking with me, and if you are, you can see this fly is starting to get a little profile to it. All right, so that is pretty much the majority of the front portion of, or even though it's tied on the rear of the hook, the front portion of this shrimp, or its head and all that good stuff. So now I'm going to get ready for a loop that we're going to use here in a few steps. So I'm just going to make my loop and then I'll get it out of the way. There's 3 wraps around, so we've got a nice closure at the top there. Tie it down again. Try not to move that vise on you. And good. So now I'm just going to slip my spinner into the bottom of this loop and put it to the side for now. Alright, so now I do have a piece of wire, and this is copper brown, and it's a size small, and you could definitely use brassy, even medium on a larger shrimp if you wanted. Now what I'm going to do is tie this on your side of the hook. I'll get it started almost on top, right behind those weighted wire, and at least that's the theory. There we go. And now I'm going to tie this so that it ends up on your side, or opposite of my tying side, right up against that leg, like so. And come back. So now back here on this, right behind the bead, I've got some thin skin, and I know you guys have seen me use this once or twice. So here we've got the clear with black spots, and as you see, where I'm going to tie it in, I've made that crayon tip sort of cut, and I've left the top, which will sit over the fly, just flat for now. We'll shape that after we've got it tied in. So peel that off the backing, ta-da, and that little crayon tip that you created, we'll use that as our tie-in, and hopefully not drop it. There we go. And the key when you're using this is position before completely tightening down with thread wraps, because we do want this to sit over the back. I'll show you on top so that it's even, and then when we bring that forward, of course that'll be our shrimp shell. And all the way tied in. Let's get some thread wraps back here, really solidify that thin skin and tie it down securely. Perfect. All right, so now we have everything set up. All we need to do is fill in this body. So in this loop, we are going to use some sand variant rabbit, and I've got probably a 2.5 inch section. We're going to pack this body a little bit tight, but if you've worked with rabbit before, and if you put it in a loop, it really doesn't have a lot of density, and we don't want this body to just collapse on us and have a skinny body, the big bead, and in this big head. It's not going to look too familiar for you. So what we're going to do is I've got some Pete's Peach shrimp, Simi seal, and I'm just going to get a noodle on here on my thread. Doesn't have to be beautiful or by any means, because this is just to bulk up that underbody a little and give us some structure so that when we finish with our loop and we're ready to rib, that rib has something to grab onto and maintain a profile. So we're just going to somewhat quickly get this wrapped up. And as you can see, this is going to eat up quite a bit of dubbing, which is great. We're not concerned with that part. And I'm just going to need a little more to get it all the way back to behind the bead there. That should get her done. And continue wrapping. Try not to wrap that thin skin down. It wants to be in that fly so badly, it's going early, but we're not going to let it. Keep the legs out of the dubbing. All these good little tips here. And we're back. Ta-da. So this is not going to show through very much, but there will be little wisps after we brush out the loop and the rabbit that do show. So now let's get this rabbit into our loop. Make sure that's not trapping any of those legs in that loop. We'll save that for a different fly. All right. And this is probably going to be too much hair, but again, I do like to pack this in pretty densely just for the sake of preserving the profile of that body. And there we go. Get all those hairs in there. It can be a little tricky at first. Just take your time, be patient, and now you see all that's ready to go. All we have to do is remove the leather now from that loop. There we go. And now we let the magic happen and spin her up. I'm going to just move those legs out of the way there. We are spinning. So you see here, this, not all shrimp are clear or pink or peach or anything. I mean, there's so many different variations on shrimp coloration. And this is, you know, probably one of those that I'll fish a little sandier bottom, even a little mud. It'll fit right in, and fish won't even flinch. So here we've got a little brush. I'm just going to get rid of any of these excess fibers, brush out any that are trapped in from the spinning process. And this is a very thick loop of rabbit. All right, digging it. And so our first wrap here, I'm going to pull back the legs on my side and get one wrap behind those. And the same thing on your side, like so. So now you see how that pushes the legs almost backward, which is fine. That's what we want for this. And then on the second wrap, we're going to fix that and start grooming that rabbit so that it's pushing forward or facing forward. And the same thing again, the legs on your side, I'm going to hold those as I make that wrap. And now they're neither pointing forward or back, they're just kind of hanging down. And that's what we want. We want them to stay out of that hook gap here and away from anything that's going to push them into trouble on the fly body itself. And that's how you do. And now we'll just continue wrapping our loop. And again, keep in mind, try to keep those fibers coaxed or trained toward the rear portion of the fly, which is the hook point. And there's a lot of moving parts at this point, so take a deep breath. Don't breathe on the rabbit, but take a deep breath, calmly remind yourself it's just a fly. We can be patient. And a couple more wraps here, and this thing is going to be filled in. So you see what looked like a lot of rabbit is just the right amount. And now I've got one more wrap there. And now this last wrap, I'm going to come behind the thin skin. So I'm just going to push it out of the way, and like so. And now when I tie this loop off, it's all behind that thin skin. And a couple more wraps, secure. And now bring that tag end forward, secure again. And now when we cut this tag end of the loop out, there's no option for that to move anywhere. And so you see we've got a big old shrimp body that is full of rabbit fiber that is going to just breathe and move and really not want to sit still, and that's going to work to our advantage. So now, as far as this top piece of thin skin, let me turn this vise so you can see what I'm talking about. See where it hits that hook point right there as we're bringing it forward? We're going to actually poke onto the hook like so. And now when I undo it off that hook point, I know exactly where I have to cut that so that as I push it forward, it's going to go around the hook point. So from here, I'm going to start, it's what's going to be the tag end, and just make a cut in a, again, like an exaggerated tip of a crayon here. So we want a V, but we want it this way. So I'll make the first cut toward the end there. And then from that spot, I'll match up our V. So there's a really bad crayon tip. There we go. Now it's more like what we're looking for. And then I'm just going to cut right up the center onto that point where we made our mark, so that now when I go over the top. You see it just slides right over both sides of that hook point. And at this point, we are ready for that rib. And this is really going to bring all this stuff together. So wiggle that wire the whole time you're trying to get through that rabbit and leave as much of that rabbit underneath the fly as possible. Brush back with your other hand as you go. And then this first wrap, you really want to position before you really start pulling down and yanking on it. So you can see this is going to be our first wrap. And then from there, wiggle through that rabbit. Try not to grab any of it on the way up. And our second wrap. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Get through all that rabbit. And the legs are bouncing already. This fly is trying to jump out of the vise. And another wrap. And we got room for a couple more here. And like so. And that should just about do it. And as you can see on the top there, that's the segmentation we're going for. And now one last wrap here. And really, you could add a couple wraps of this wire just to make sure it's secure and not moving. And now we'll tie it off. A couple grabs with the thread there, and then we're going to bring that wire forward, sneak a wrap behind, and trim out our wire. So that piece I just cut, I do want to make sure it's trapped by the thread, but I also don't need it coming up onto the body of the fly. So that's about where I want it, and we will tie that down. All that's left at this point is the whip finishes. And let me trim out one little hair there. All right. We're going to be doing 2 whip finishes, 4 or 5 wraps per whip finish. Try not to grab any rabbit if you can. There's the first whip finish. And now we're ready for the second. And there we go. Trim out your thread, like so. And now let's trim these legs. I want the legs, again, roughly the length of the body. So if you translate that, it comes out to you roughly there. That's a pretty natural look for some shrimp legs. And then underneath, if you want, again, get out your little brush and brush this guy out just a touch. There are some trapped fibers. So release those. You will hit maybe a couple of those Simi fibers that are under that rabbit. And so now you're going to bring a few of those trapped fibers out. And what will happen is there'll be some subtle shine in that body too. And so as this thing's breathing and moving in the water, the fish are going to see it. And then get into where we wrapped around the eyes and brush those out too. You can be pretty aggressive, get some of those loosened up and kicked out. So now, instead of just a little bit of head cement, we're going to go ahead and hit the entire top of this shrimp shell with some UV thin from Loon, and this is UV clear fly finish, and just a nice thin coat all over the top there. And I'm going just in front of that first wire wrap. I don't want to inhibit any movement of the head. I just want to give some strength to this thin skin and the wire, and so by doing it this way, it'll do all of that at one time for me. And this is going to make it a very strong fly. Make sure you've got some of that resin on the thread wraps there too, and it soaks in, and then as you cure it with the light, this thing is going nowhere and it's almost indestructible. And there we go. So I'll spin this for you. This is a little bunny shrimp on the new Ahrex SA254. And now let me grab this guy out of the vise. Make sure all of our materials are split around the head. As you look at this guy, he's looking pretty shrimpy, and with that spawn football bead on there and a jig style hook, it's already positioned for success. All you need to do is get it in the water. I hope you guys had fun. Tie this up. We'd love to see some pictures of what you guys are doing with these flies. If you have any comments, please be sure to leave them below. And as always, please click the like and subscribe buttons. It does make a difference, and we appreciate it. And I hope to see you all on the water.